What is going on YouTube? Is FlopFish here, and welcome back to another Hearthstone video. Today we are going over a deck build, and this is actually my Ysera Druid build. It's not 100% like up to what I want it to be because a lot of the cards are actually like legendaries or something like that. But nonetheless, it's still very solid, and it's a deck that I tend to do fairly well with. I'm able to win over 50% of my games with, and a lot of the times there's some games that I probably shouldn't win that I'm just able to hold on to because of how powerful the deck can be at times and how quickly you can turn the tables on someone. So let's go ahead and let's get started from the top down. Again, Druid, basis of it, +1 attack, +1 armor. Really good for taking out 1 health minions, and again, you kind of get the 1 armor, which, hey, if you have spare mana each turn, you can use that to kind of build your armor up and deal 1 damage to the hero. So pretty solid there. Now let's get right into the cards. And again, there's a curve. It's a bit of a different curve. Kind of all over the place, but I'll explain why it's pretty solid in a minute. So first off, we've got 2 Innervates, probably the most broken card in the game, one of the most broken cards in the game, because you get 2 mana crystals for the cost of nothing. So say you go second and you have the ring card, well, you draw 2 of these and you draw your Ysera, which is the finishing card, or whatever finishing card you have. Guess what? Turn 4, you can summon it. Turn 3, you could summon an 8 minion card or 8 mana card. You know, turn 5, you can summon a 10 mana card. Pretty ridiculous stuff here because, again, for the cost of nothing, you're getting 5 mana crystals with all those 3 combined. Pretty good cards, pretty broken cards to run. That's why I like to run them. I run 2 Moonfires simply because of the fact it helps me just control the board a little bit early on. And once I establish that early board control, a lot of people have trouble dealing with this deck, and that's where I like to kind of have it. I want to keep the board nice and clean, kind of for the later parts of it, where it shines. But they're also really good when combined with the Kobold Geomancer, just because you can deal 2 damage. Again, turn 2, you can be dealing 2 damage to 2 things. So for the cost of, again, just only 2 mana for summoning it, and then these are both no mana cards. So are they replaceable? Yes, but for right now, for the time being, they're going to hold pretty well in this deck. And again, you could probably swap in minions if you really wanted for them. Kind of do what works for you. I find them working right now, for me at least, well enough to keep them in the deck. And yeah, so I find them pretty useful. Next up, we've got my Leopard Gnome, which is a very good 1 mana card. Again, deal 2 damage to the enemy hero. It's a 2/1 card. Play it first turn, nothing really to worry about there. It's just a card to get out on that first turn. Again, it's a little bit of a harder draw in this deck. I have a 1 in 30 chance of drawing it. So I mean, in your first cards, you have, I guess, a 6 in 30 chance of drawing it, which is pretty solid. 1 in 5 chance, not bad. And so it's just a good card to start off things with. Next, I have 1 Mark of Wild. I'm probably gonna get rid of this card eventually, like I just did there. And I guess I'll kind of explain why. Again, I'll explain why a little bit later on, but right now what it holds is just a good way to get an early taunt on the board with Ancient Watcher. Again, Ancient Watcher is a really, really good card. I would highly suggest it if you're running any sort of control deck or any late game deck. So yeah, next up I've got 2 Wild Girls, and these are just awesome cards. Again, if you're going second and you draw on first turn, you have 3 mana crystals in the second turn, which means you're pretty much just going first the rest of the game. If you use your second one, or if you get your second one, well, you've got 5 in the third turn, and you can kind of get a pretty good leg up on your opponent. Again, a very good card. Well, it's a little bit overpowered, but again, you have to draw it right, and it wastes kind of your first 2 turns, and you kind of lose the advantage. But no worries, because you got some good spell damages to make up for that later on, some good spell cards. Speaking of one, we've got Wrath. I'm going to eventually get 2 of these in here, just because I really like how useful they are. You can deal 3 damage to a minion or 1 damage and draw a card. Very, very useful, very versatile card, because again, you can take out some cards earlier on or later on that you need to, and when combined with, say, spell damage +1, well, you're going to be in good shoes there. So, and 3/1 with 3 or 1 with that, 2 mana cost. Drawing the card's always useful when you have a deck like this, and it's a card that, again, very versatile. One that I suggest people run, especially in a Druid deck. Again, you can only run it in a Druid deck, but I just find it really useful. And I don't know, if you're not running it, I think you're doing it wrong. Especially early on. Again, early on, it's pretty good. Personally speaking. Now, 2 Ancient Watchers. Again, if you're not running these, kind of doing it wrong in my opinion, especially when combined with, say, some taunts. So Mark of Wild, Mark of Nature, the Defender of Argus, Sunfury Protector. Those types of cards, pretty good, but there's also a little bit of a trick to them because you can actually silence them. However, if you're going to be running them with the taunt, there's a chance that they might silence them because they're so good early on. So if they silence them early on, you can use it to attack. And that's also why I run Spellbreaker right here, is because if I'm in, say, turn 6 or turn 5 and I see it and I summon this, and all of a sudden I see I have a Spellbreaker, I can actually just kind of put it on it and got a 4/5 minion out there to start attacking with, which is the same as the Chillwind Yeti. So pretty solid there. That's why I like running those, because they're pretty ridiculously good. And again, when combined with some stuff, become really, really good cards, like great cards. And one that I highly suggest running in a bit of a control deck. Now, onto the Kobold Geomancer. Now, this card, one of the ones I have the most trouble with pronouncing, but if we go over to the two mana cost cards, this card's up for debate pretty much between that and normally Fairy Dragon are the two cards, or an Acidic Swamp Ooze. Again, these are just useful when you're going up against decks with weapons. These are useful when you're going up against a mage, I find. And these are good when you have all your spells in your deck. So also Knife Juggler can find it from time to time, and same with Youthful Brewmaster actually. But I just find it the best card right now with the 2 Moonfires, because again, the quick early damage, and also with the swipes. Again, at 6 cost, you can deal 5 damage to one enemy and 2 to the rest. Pretty ridiculously good card right there if you can combine those together. Next up, I only run 1 Healing Touch. The reason why I only run 1 Healing Touch is pretty easy, because again, if I run 2, it's 16 health, and I really don't feel the need to run 2, especially with this deck, and it kind of gives me that little bit of a safety net in case I fall down in health, and I can heal back up pretty quickly. So that's why I only run 1. If I run 2, I really don't feel the need for 2 right now. It's a card I'll probably get rid of later on for something that heals more damage or heals more health, and is a minion. So, you know, we'll see there. But then I got 2 Mark of Natures. These are really good because it can actually change the complete face of this deck. It can actually change it from a late game deck, which typically it's a mid to late game deck. It can change it from that to an early just rush deck, especially when you combine it with stuff, say like a Chillwind Yeti, your Ancient Watchers that are silent, something like that. You can get +4 attack on there and just really take over a game. You can get +8 attack from these 2 cards, so that's pretty huge when you can get something like that. But the +4 health and taunt is also really good when you're facing a priest deck, which I find to be the hardest deck to win, just because you can put that on your Ancient Watcher and they can't take it out with any of the Shadow Words. So it gives you a 4/9 taunt on the board, pretty hard to take out, and a lot of the stuff that's going to be attacking it is going to be taking out itself, and that's why I like to run that. And that's why Mark of the Wild is actually kind of a little bit more expendable now. So now that I'm running both of those, I really feel the need to just kind of get rid of it. But if you don't have the Mark of Wild, if you don't have the Mark of Nature's, Mark of Wild's actually a pretty good card to play instead. It's not quite the same, but it still serves the same purpose. So again, next up, best card in the deck as far as I'm concerned is a Swipe. Just if you're running a Druid without really running them, I'm pretty sure you're doing it wrong. Deal 4 damage to one enemy and 1 to the rest. That becomes a 5 and a 2 with a Kobold, or whatchamacallit, an Ysera Drake, anything spell damage +1. And it's just going to wipe the board clean for you. And when you're wiping the board clean and getting your board control, it's really, really, really useful. And especially in a late game deck, you don't want them to have too many minions on the board. So, yeah, that's just why I like to run 2, especially 2. I would run like 10 if I could. Although it'd be a little bit overpowered, but even if I could run like 4 of the cards, I definitely would do that. Next up, we've got the kind of area that it's open for change. We got 1 Chillwind Yeti, which is just typical 4-cost card. It's 4/5. Nothing really more can be said there. It's a good card to run. I like the way it plays personally, so that's why I like to run it, especially at 4 mana cost. It can be pretty useful at times, just deal some damage or trade some minions or stuff. And then I run a Defender of Argus. Now this one I might replace with a Sunfury Protector. And the main reason why I run this is because of the Ancient Watchers, or a Chillwind Yeti and an Ancient Watcher on the board. Summon this and you've got 2 taunts just like that are really good taunts. And again, not much they can do about that. unless they're a priest and they have a couple shadow words, and then they can take them off the board pretty quickly for cheap. But other than that, they're going to be attacking them, and you're going to be left with a pretty solid minion advantage about 90% of the time. Speaking of taunts, we've got Shield Master. Again, this is just there. It's a cheap taunt to play. It's 3-5. It's one of the more common taunts out there, and I think everyone will kind of say it that for the cost of it, it's a really good taunt. Again, 3-5, does a good amount of damage, has a decent amount of health, and just something that can kind of control the game a little bit more and slow it down and delay it for you to get to your later end of the deck, which is what you're trying to do with this. So next up, we've got 2 Ysera Drakes. Oh no, we actually got Spellbreaker. Again, I went over this earlier, but you can use it to actually silence your Ancient Watchers so they can attack, or you can also use it to silence, say, something like a Ysera or an 8-8 taunt, or something that you really need to silence in order to win the game later on. And that's just why I run it. Again, it's swappable with an Ironbeak Owl. Ironbeak Owl is a 2-1, cheaper cost for it, but I run the Spellbreaker just because it's the only one I have right now, and I want to save my Enchanting Dust for kind of higher end cards right now. So again, it's a 4-3 minion worst case scenario, which is always very solid. Next up, the Ysera Drake, which in my opinion, one of the best cards in the game, especially like a rare card. Does 3 things. You get a 4-4 on the board, spell damage +1, and you draw a card. That's pretty wicked for the cost of 5 mana. And again, just really good overall card to play. It's again combined with Swipes, combined with the Moonfire, and also combined with the Starfire. You're going to be doing quite a bit of damage, quite a bit of spell damage, which when you're trying to get a late game deck or control over the board, it's definitely going to be working in your favor. So that is why I run 2 of them. And then I run 2 Druid of the Claws, which will probably be replaceable eventually. The main reason why I run them right now is because I don't have something like a Hogger or something to play in that kind of territory. But again, they're pretty good for their cost. They're a charge, and you can choose between a charge and a 4-4, or a 4-6 and a taunt, which for the cost of 5 is pretty solid. The 4-4 and charge is really good because you can gain that minion advantage and kind of force them to deal with it. And same with the 4-6 taunt. If you got a couple things up and you need to protect them, then you can go ahead and use that on it. So next up, I run 1 Starfire. It's a good card, deals 5 damage, and you draw a card. It's just a good spell card to take out the higher end enemies, and again, or the higher end minions and stuff like that. I just like having it in the deck, and when you combine it again with some spell damages, can deal 6+. So pretty good right there as far as I'm concerned. It's a good control card, so that's why I like to run it. Next up, we got an Archmage. Again, the main reason why I run an Archmage is 4-7. It's a good card that way, as in the fact that it'll take a little bit to take off the board. More often than not, they're not going to be able to take it off first turn. So your second turn, you can combine it with either some Swipes or some Moonfires or the Starfire, and you're going to be able to deal quite a bit of damage and again gain that control. And it can also bait out some Hexes and some Polymorphs from Mages and Shamans, which if you can bait them out early on, which is why I kind of have the next 2 cards, you won't have to worry about them being used on your Ysera. And speaking of the next 2 cards, we've got a Stormwind Champion, +1/+1 for your other minions in the 6/6. It's a decent card overall to run. Is it the best in this deck? Probably not, but it's more of a card that I use as bait, so that if I have a couple minions on the board and they want to take something out, well, they're going to be taking out this because it gives everything a +1/+1. So it gives me a little bit of an advantage there, and that's why I like to run it. And same with Ironbark. More often than not, you're going to have people trying to deal with this right away because it is an 8-8 taunt, which pretty much means any minion that comes to attack it is going to die. It'll normally take 2 to 3 to kill it, so again, pretty good advantage there. And it's also a taunt, which means they might have to silence it, and if you can draw anything away like silences and polymorphs away from your finishing card, you're going to be doing pretty well. So that's why these cards are really, really crucial in this deck, I find. Even the Ysera Drakes will actually draw them on it, and actually even the Ancient Watchers will as well if you combine them correctly. So finishing card, again, the whole purpose of this deck is Ysera, one of the best legend cards in the game, one of the most consistent ones, and at the end of the turn you draw one of the cards from Ysera's deck, one of the dream cards, and there's a return a minion to the enemy's hand. They are Nightmare, which is one that gives you a random minion a +5/+5 and then it dies next turn. That one can actually be used pretty usefully if you have a couple taunts on the board and they have a higher end minion. Apply it to that, and if they can only take out one minion, well, guess what? It's going to be gone next turn, so pretty solid there. And then you also have Laughing Sister, which is a 3 mana cost, and the first two, the return a minion to the enemy's hand and the Nightmare, are both 0 mana cost. For 3 mana cost, you get a Laughing Sister. Again, these are just randomly assigned to you, and it's a 3/5 minion. Again, same thing with the Fairy Dragon, which is something that can find its way into this deck. It can't be targeted directly from hero powers or spells. Stays on the board a little bit longer for you, which is kind of nice. And again, 3/5 isn't bad at all for a 3 mana cost. At a 2 mana cost, you have I think it's Ysera Awakens, and it deals 5 damage to all the minions, like all the characters on the board, except for Ysera. So it's a pretty beast card, because if you can combo it and get right, say they have like 3 or 4 minions on the board with 5 health or less, or 4 health, and you have a couple like ones with 2 or 3 on the board, you can actually just directly attack their hero, play that card, and then the board's clean except for your Ysera, who's in perfect shape, and you know, more often than not, you're going to be able to win. And when you combine that with the final card, which is an Emerald Drake, which is a 7/6 dragon, which costs 4 mana. Wicked card to play and pretty overpowered at that rate. So you can start to get some really high-end minions on the board really quickly. And again, you combine them with the Stormwind Champion, you're going to be in really good shoes. So anyways, that is my Ysera Druid deck. Kind of went through it and explained it all to you guys. Ysera is a pretty good card. Luckily, well, kind of not luckily, a little bit unfortunate if I'm concerned, I actually pulled a regular one, and kind of debating whether I want to sell this one, because if I sell this one, disenchant it, I can craft any legend I want to. However, the gold one it looks really cool, so I'm kind of just debating not doing that and actually selling this one. But yeah, let me know your guys' thoughts on it. Hopefully you enjoyed the video, and that is my Ysera Druid deck. As always, take it easy, and I'll catch you guys on the flop side.